So, you know that feeling when something seems almost too good to be true, like a cause everyone's behind,
Yeah.
but there's this little voice in your head wondering if maybe there's something else going on, a hidden agenda.
Yeah, that instinct. It's often quite accurate, and that's pretty much exactly what we're digging into in this deep dive.
Right.
We're looking closely at exploitation of altruism, psychopathic manipulation in environmental, social justice, and equity initiatives. It's by D.S. Matthews.
Okay. And for you listening, you're probably someone who, cares about these things, the environment, social justice, equity. You're invested.
Right.
But you're not naive either. You want to understand let's say, the potential pitfalls, how good intentions can get twisted, but without, getting totally cynical about everything.
Exactly.
So our mission here is really to pull out the key insights from this book to help all of us be more informed, more discerning.
And the core idea Matthews puts forward is, well, it's pretty unsettling, frankly. He explores how certain individuals, people with psychopathic traits, can actually infiltrate and manipulate these altruistic movements, these organizations.
For their own gain.
Yeah, exactly. For personal gain. It could be money, power, or even just what psychologists call narcissistic supply, that constant need for admiration. And they hide this behind a sort of mask of virtue.
Yeah, it's a disturbing thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this deep dive, we'll look at what Matthews covers, the psychology of these exploiters.
The traits.
Real-world examples, or blended ones, showing their tactics, how organizations become vulnerable.
Yeah, the weak spots.
And crucially, what can be done, the safeguards. So, okay, let's start with understanding the exploiter. What does that look like according to the book?
Well, Matthews identifies several core psychopathic traits that tend to show up again and again. Maybe the most fundamental one, a complete lack of remorse or guilt.
No remorse or guilt.
None. Just think about that.
Yeah.
They can cause real harm, significant harm, and just not feel bad about it. Not in the way most of us would. It's like that internal brake system is just missing.
That's really hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? If I knew I'd hurt someone, you'd wrestle with that.
Yeah.
But for them, nothing.
Pretty much, yeah. And closely tied to that is pathological lying.
Okay.
This isn't just, the little white lie. It's constant, almost compulsive deception. Sometimes even when the lie doesn't seem to achieve anything obvious, lying just becomes their normal way of operating.
Wow.
A tool for manipulation, for inflating themselves. So you really can't trust what they say.
Which makes dealing with them incredibly difficult, I imagine. What else? What other traits does Matthews point out?
Conning and manipulativeness are really central. They seem to have this knack for spotting weaknesses in people and just exploiting those weaknesses for their own ends. They're often very good at playing people off against each other.
Right. Divide and conquer.
Exactly. And then there's this grandiose sense of self-worth, just a hugely inflated view of their own importance, their abilities, often comes with a real sense of entitlement too.
The classic massive ego, but kind of weaponized.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And this grandiosity, it's often covered up by superficial charm.
Ah, the charm.
Right. But it's not genuine warmth. It's like a performance. It's calculated to win trust, build a quick rapport, make a good first impression.
So it's a tool.
It's absolutely a tool. Lowers people's defenses, deflects suspicion, so someone can seem incredibly dedicated, really likable.
While actually being manipulative underneath.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
It is. Other traits to watch for include impulsivity, a lack of self-control. This can lead to rash decisions, risky behavior without really thinking about the consequences for the cause or the people involved.
Okay.
And they often have this constant need for stimulation, for excitement. Matthews even suggests they might see these altruistic initiatives as a kind of playground.
A play.
Yeah, somewhere they can exercise their manipulative skills, get a thrill from deceiving people, from being in control.
Using good causes as their personal game. Yeah. That's quite chilling.
It is. And then you often see a parasitic lifestyle, relying on others for money, support, not really pulling their weight, feeling entitled to help. And finally, a lack of realistic long-term goals. They might drift, from one thing to the next, unable to really commit or see things through.
It paints a really unsettling picture, doesn't it? Now, the book mentions eco-psychopathy, specifically regarding environmental initiatives. What's that about?
Yeah, eco-psychopathy, as Matthews defines it, is basically these same psychopathic traits playing out in an environmental context.
Yeah.
It's about putting profit, personal gain, way ahead of environmental responsibility, often involving deliberate deception, causing actual environmental harm.
Can you give us an example, something concrete?
Sure. I mean, think about the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal.
Yeah.
That's a pretty stark example discussed in the book.
Ah, right, the emissions cheating.
Exactly. They marketed these cars as clean diesel, environmentally friendly, but behind the scenes, they were using software to cheat on emissions tests,
Knowing they were polluting way more.
knowingly deceiving regulators, customers, everyone, showing a real lack of concern for the environmental damage, the health impacts, all for profit. That's eco-psychopathy in action, according to Matthew's framework.
A huge breach of trust with massive real-world impact. So it's not just apathy, it's active deception for gain.
Precisely. The book also talks about things like fraudulent carbon offset schemes.
Carbon offsets, how are they fraudulent?
Well, someone might sell offsets based on projects that promise to reduce carbon emissions, planting trees, investing in renewables, whatever. But sometimes those reductions don't actually happen, or the projects are completely made up.
So companies buy them to look good.
Right, to appear green without making real changes. And the person selling the fraudulent offsets pockets the money. Again, total disregard for the actual environmental outcome.
It sounds like just appearing altruistic can be a key tactic. Matthews mentions this as a source of narcissistic supply. What does that mean, practically speaking?
Narcissistic supply. Think of it like fuel for the ego, a constant, almost addictive need for admiration, validation from others.
Okay.
And altruistic settings, they're perfect for this because these individuals can position themselves as champions, as saviors of a cause. They get constant praise, attention for how supposedly selfless they are.
So they're using the cause to feed their own ego.
Essentially, yes. It's that look at me, I'm so virtuous, dynamic, but driven by a much deeper need. They might exaggerate their role, take credit for others' work, make themselves seem indispensable.
Right.
This constant need for admiration, for validation, that's the narcissistic supply. It drives the facade. They crave the spotlight, the feeling of superiority that comes from being seen as this great moral actor.
Like wearing a mask of goodness just to feel good about themselves. Okay, so if people like this are out there, how do these well-meaning groups, these initiatives, become so vulnerable? What makes them easy targets?
Well, Matthews points to several things. Some are inherent in the nature of altruism itself,
Like what?
like the core values. Compassion, empathy, that real desire to help. These can actually be turned against the group by someone who knows how to fake those emotions. It's a sad irony.
So the very things that make the work important also create vulnerabilities. That's tough.
It is. And then there are organizational factors.
Hmm.
Things like decentralized structures, informal setups.
Less rigid, maybe.
Yeah, which can mean less oversight, fewer checks and balances. Accountability can get fuzzy. This creates room for manipulators to operate without being easily spotted or challenged.
Okay.
The book also notes the heavy reliance on volunteers. Now, volunteers are the lifeblood of many groups, but it can mean a lack of specific professional expertise, maybe in finance or HR, and volunteer turnover can be high, making it harder to see long-term patterns of manipulation.
That makes sense. Dedicated people, but maybe not equipped for, like, forensic accounting.
Exactly. And the strong emphasis on trust and collaboration, which is vital.
Yeah, essential.
But it can be exploited by someone skilled at faking empathy, getting people to trust them without question. If the culture discourages questioning motives, that's a big red flag.
The book mentions a fear of disruption, too.
Yeah.
What role does that play?
Yeah. That's when maybe a charismatic figure starts doing questionable things, but people hesitate to speak up. They might worry about being labeled negative or disloyal to the cause, or being pushed out, or even accused of undermining the mission they care about.
So they stay silent.
Often, yes. Also, a lack of clear boundaries, unclear roles and responsibilities that makes it easier for exploiters to overstep or operate without consequence. And in very collaborative settings, responsibility can get so spread out
That no one is really accountable.
Exactly. It allows manipulators to dodge scrutiny.
It really does sound like a potential perfect storm. What about money? These groups often handle donations, grants.
Absolutely. Financial vulnerability is huge. Access to funds is a major weak point.
How so?
Manipulators might misappropriate money for personal use, funnel it into shell companies they control, inflate expenses, create fake projects. The list goes on.
Wow.
They can also leverage the networks built through the altruistic work, connect with donors, investors, but really for their own benefit under the guise of the cause.
So even things that seem legitimate, like consulting fees or travel.
Could absolutely be exploited. Unusually high fees to dodgy consultants, lavish travel with vague justifications, these can be ways to siphon off money, or grants being awarded to organizations secretly connected to the perpetrator.
It seems to circle back to that goodness bias you mentioned, this reluctance to believe someone involved in good work could be doing bad things.
It really does. That bias lowers our guard, makes us less likely to put strong checks in place. Which brings us to the tactics. How do they actually manipulate?
Okay, yeah, this is crucial for people to recognize, right? What are the common tactics?
One big one, especially in the environmental space, is greenwashing.
We hear that term a lot.
It's basically making a company, a product, whatever, seem way more environmentally friendly than it actually is. It can be very profitable attracting conscious consumers without making real changes. For those listening, it means you really need to look past the labels.
Dig deeper than the marketing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's everywhere. It's hard to tell what's real sometimes.
It is. Then there's exploiting labor.
How does that work in these contexts?
Altruistic groups often depend on volunteers, lower-paid staff who are really dedicated. A manipulator might demand crazy hours, create a toxic environment, maybe withhold proper pay, all while publicly talking about justice or fairness.
The hypocrisy is just,
Right.
wow. What if someone does question them? How do they react?
Often by shifting blame. Projection is common too.
Projection.
Yeah, accusing the person raising the concern of being the negative one, the divisive one, or even accusing them of the very manipulative things they themselves are doing.
Turning it back on the questioner.
Exactly. Twisting words is another favorite. Taking things out of context, misrepresenting intentions to make legitimate concerns sound unreasonable or malicious.
Creating their own reality to deflect criticism.
Precisely. They also get good at rationalizing their deception, maybe using moral licensing,
Moral licensing.
arguing that the ends justify the means, that lying or misleading is somehow necessary for the greater good of the cause. And over time, especially if they're praised a lot, they can develop this real sense of entitlement, like the rules don't apply to them.
That sounds incredibly toxic within a group.
It absolutely is. In equity work, you might see tokenism,
Tokenism. Like,
putting a few people from marginalized groups in visible roles, but not actually changing the underlying power structures or inequalities. It looks like progress, but it's superficial.
right. Allows them to say, see, we're diverse.
While silencing calls for real change, they also frequently exploit empathy, emotional appeals, playing the victim to get sympathy, support, or just to dodge scrutiny.
And the book mentions exploiting trauma narratives. That sounds really bad.
It's deeply harmful, yeah. Someone might co-opt genuine stories of trauma or hardship from others to gain credibility or sympathy for themselves, misrepresenting those experiences, causing more harm.
Using someone else's pain.
Yeah. And to confuse things further, they might use a lot of jargon, complex intellectual language
Why?
to obfuscate,
Yeah.
to make things unclear, maybe intimidate people so they don't ask critical questions. It's a way to shut down dialogue.
Deliberately making it sound complicated.
Exactly. Emotional blackmail, guilt tripping, also common tools. If they're charismatic, they can use that charm to suppress questions, even mismanage money while followers defend them.
What else?
Things like triangulation, creating conflict between others to maintain control, love bombing, showering someone with attention, then abruptly withdrawing it, scapegoating when things go wrong, even manipulating data, cherry-picking metrics, spinning the narrative through PR. It's a whole toolkit.
It's a really disturbing list of tactics. The book uses case studies to show this in action, right? Can you share a couple examples just to make it more real?
Sure. Matthews includes several blended or illustrative case studies. One is the sustainable solutions scandal. Picture a charismatic CEO praised for his green vision, secretly diverting millions meant for renewable energy projects into his own offshore accounts, leaving the intended communities worse off. That shows the financial exploitation clearly.
Okay.
Then there's the equity hoax example. An organization implements diversity training, looks good on paper.
Right. Ticking the box.
Exactly, but it's superficial. It doesn't touch the real systemic issues. Leadership claims progress, but nothing fundamentally changes, and people pointing that out get silenced. It shows how easily appearances can be faked. For you listening, these really highlight that disconnect.
Just because they talk the talk doesn't mean they walk the walk.
Not at all. There's also a case of a community organizer who starts out seeming dedicated,
Yeah.
but gradually manipulates members to consolidate power and divert resources for personal use. Or a corrupt charity CEO whose board is too focused on harmony, too reluctant to challenge him, enabling massive embezzlement for years.
So the board failed in its oversight.
Completely. There's a social justice advocate, scam someone fabricating stories of hardship, misusing donations, and equity initiative fraud that was basically a Ponzi scheme disguised as philanthropy.
A Ponzi scheme, good grief.
And finally, the Evergreen Timber Court case, a stark example of massive greenwashing, hiding huge deforestation behind a slick sustainability campaign.
These examples really drive home the real-world damage, don't they? It's not just about money lost, it's trust destroyed, vital causes undermined. So, the big question, what can we do? What does Matthew suggest for mitigation, for safeguards, actionable stuff for listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Matthews outlines several key strategies. Number one, maybe the most important, promote radical transparency and disclosure.
Meaning?
Organizations need to be open about their impact, their finances, how decisions are made, and that info needs to be easily accessible, publicly.
Okay, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Pretty much. Second, enhance independent verification and certification. Make sure claims are checked by impartial third parties rigorously. This builds trust and spots fraud.
More outside eyes, more accountability. Makes sense.
Exactly. Also, promoting more decentralized leadership, spreading power out, reduces the risk of one person manipulating everything.
Less concentration of power.
Right. And fostering a culture of critical thinking, healthy skepticism, encouraging people to ask tough questions, challenge assumptions. That's vital.
Not just accepting things at face value because it's a good cause.
Precisely. On a practical level, thorough background checks for key people, that's basic but essential. Strengthening internal controls is huge too.
Like what kind of control?
Segregating financial duties so one person doesn't control everything. Regular independent audits. Strong protected whistleblower policies so people feel safe raising concerns.
What about educating people to spot these traits, these tactics?
Yes. Training and education on psychopathic traits. Manipulation tactics that empowers people inside organizations to recognize and respond to harmful behavior.
Knowledge is power.
It really is. Also, establishing clear lines of authority, clear accountability, setting up independent ethics committees or ombudspersons safe channels for raising issues, regular risk assessments to find vulnerabilities proactively, robust oversight mechanisms, encouraging whistleblowing, protecting those who speak up, diversifying leadership, seeking outside expertise when needed, strong ethical codes of conduct, due diligence in hiring, partnerships, funding. It's a comprehensive approach.
It sounds like a lot.
It is, but it's necessary. Even broader things help: stronger laws, better media literacy so people can evaluate claims, scenario planning, using data analytics to detect fraud, building resilient networks, all pieces of the puzzle.
It really sounds like vigilance isn't optional. It's essential to protect these efforts.
It truly is. So to kind of wrap up the main point,
Yeah.
altruism is incredibly important, a vital force, but we have to be realistic and acknowledge it can be exploited. Understanding the tactics, the vulnerabilities, that's the key to protecting genuine efforts, making sure resources actually help.
And for you listening, being more aware, more discerning, it lets you contribute effectively, ethically, without becoming totally disillusioned. You can be both hopeful and smart about it.
Exactly. So as you engage with causes you care about, maybe just pause and consider, how might these insights from Matthew's book apply here? Look critically, yes, but keep that hopeful perspective too. Remember, vigilance isn't the enemy of altruism.
It's more like its necessary companion.
Well put. A
Yeah.
necessary, responsible companion.
And if this has piqued your interest and you want to go deeper, the book itself, Exploitation of Altruism by D.S. Matthews, obviously goes into much more detail. It discusses things like the hair psychopathy checklist, evolutionary perspectives, lots more to explore there.
Definitely a valuable resource for anyone involved in or supporting these kinds of initiatives. It tackles a really critical challenge.